So I guess we are now broadcasting, right? Okay, so we're going to start the meeting. This is going to be a short meeting. Martin and Sebastian are not here; they are on vacation, and basically,
we still are quorum.
Yeah, and we are the quorum because well, I'm going to start first by explaining the voting process. So again, as we agreed on last meeting, no abstentions are allowed. If you abstain, that would count as a no. And we need to be, in order to vote from now on, we need to be 2/3 of the committee, which is eight people. Okay.
2/3 out of 8.
Yeah, 2/3 out of it.
Yeah, I think it says 70. I think it says 70% actually. 70%.
70%
Yeah.
of the. So this is where it's unclear. It says 70% of votes must be like you need 70% of the votes for it to win, but it doesn't say 70% of the people who are present or 70% of all of the committee. Like it's basically it's unclear. So because of that, we say 70% of the vote and basically quorum, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
that's it.
Okay.
So 70% is the majority.
Is that? I mean, if that all makes sense to all of you, and if you're fine with it, then I mean, I propose we move forward with it this way, just because it was underspecified. Like we didn't think about this scenario.
Okay. So Jorge, you'll update the process page to be more clear.
Yes.
Awesome.
Before I wanted to let you know the news, and then I will update it.
Yeah.
So okay, we move on then. The first SIP we're going to review is the SIP that Seth is presenting. So Seth, if you can tell us a little bit about it and introduce the topic.
Sure. Let me just bring up my notes here.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I was assigned to review SIP 12. The name is Uncluttering Scala's Syntax for Control Structures, and this was proposed back in 2011 by Martin. At the time, I'm not sure if there was some sort of formal decision made about it, but at least informally, what happened to it is that it was like postponed. Like we might do this at some point in the future, but we're not going to do it right now. I assume people have seen the SIP, but just briefly, it involves changing the syntax of if, while, for, do, while, those sorts of things, so that the parentheses are no longer required around, for example, the condition in if. That requires introducing one new keyword then, since you need some way of separating the condition of an if from the first branch. This was discussed. So I reviewed the discussion on the SIP itself, which is it's like a web page with discussed comments. And this was discussed quite a bit. There was discussion on the mailing list as well. I would say there was really no consensus about it. There were a lot of people who liked it, and a lot of people who had criticisms, or liked it but thought it wasn't worth doing. I think the major downsides are one, that it makes the language look a lot less like Java and other C-like languages, and part of Scala's whole idea, concept is not straying unnecessarily from Java too much. Because it's a very fundamental change to the syntax, it would be a lot of migration pain for everybody. The SIP does include a kind of step-by-step process for how the next few Scala versions could introduce the syntax, but it's still, it's like would obsolete every book, every Stack Overflow answer, every web page. And the other major doubt that people have about it is just like, well, even if it's better, even if we like it, is it really that much better? Is it like maybe if we had a time machine, we could go back to 2003. We might like this, but is it really worth doing now? Since the round of discussion back in 2011 and 2012, not that much has happened. I would say that I don't hear people talking about this. It's rare that someone brings it up at all, let alone as like this is a top priority thing for Scala. Since 2011, Dotty came along, and Dotty people, didn't choose to do anything about this. I would say the only thing that sort of that's happened since then that would help this would be if we had an automatic code rewriting tool that would help with the migration. Work on that has only just started at the Scala Center, but overall, I think that nothing really has changed since the original proposal, and so I suggest that we either reject the SIP or mark it dormant. I suppose it's conceivable that this could happen in some indefinite future, perhaps as part of a sort of sweeping reboot of Scala, but I think it just seems really unlikely that it's going to happen as an incremental change.
Yeah, I agree, and I think having one established way of doing things. I think we'll have to introduce a -z flag for this one, Andrew. If you're, Josh, you haven't been reading his comments in the appropriate voice. I noticed right. Also. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's at least the syntax is one area where there's just one way to do it in Scala, and we should have more areas where there's only one way to do things. And as excited as people get about syntactic discussions, I think. Yeah, I think it's not a good idea to have two options for everything.
Okay. So I want to point out that I think one of the key things with when there are two ways of doing something is the second way is usually in a limited subset of code that happens to be a high throughput or high instance way of writing the code. i.e., it's syntactic sugar. It shrinks general code size. It makes sense. It fits. This I don't see as that, right? There would just be two ways of doing it, as opposed to the second way is in this limited fashion. You can drop this because it's more elegant, easier, and clearer code. I think that should be the driving thing to have two different ways of specifying a construct, right? And since I have to read what Andrew says, sorry, Andrew, for not having a mic, for those of you listening. Andrew says we should put it under -y, and then we should have more confusion about parens versus braces. No, so how about the confusion over parens versus braces for for comps? Yeah, that's actually my big thing is the one thing I do like in this proposal is having then as a syntactic keyword, so that if you have a for loop that uses braces for the generators and uses braces for the expression at the bottom, you could have then and yield as duals of each other. If you want to do a loop versus a expression, that's the bit that I like. But there's confusion over whether or not to use parens or braces. That's one of those duals to weirdities in the language. If we were going to see this proposal again, I think a limited form with just targeting specific nuances might be more appropriate.
Yeah, the for one is a tricky one, right? I mean, you can also basically I don't have a good catalog in my head, unfortunately, but parens and braces are mostly interchangeable, and it's a matter of style whether you write braces for a closure that you pass to a higher order method or you use parens.
But parens require semicolons, and I feel like we should eventually deprecate semicolons if we can.
I do want to clarify.
So we can introduce them as a method namer. Sorry, go ahead.
I want them as an operator.
I want to clarify one point here, which is the proposal is not to allow both ways indefinitely. The proposal is to allow both ways only during a deprecation period, and then remove the old syntax.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed about 7 years ago. But
I will say that I am in the camp that likes that syntax better, but I agree that it would be really painful to change it.
Me too, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the major downsides of accepting this change would be ID support, basically, because other tools would need to keep up with we need to include basically a lot of changes to respect the new syntax, and this could be
yeah. Well, I think IDEs are probably pretty good at picking up these things, but just think of the massive whiplash all the Git repositories around the world are going to experience when everybody starts massively rewriting their code. I mean, let's say we can do it with tooling, right? We don't control the world, first of all, I mean, as much as we try. And just the pain of going through Git history and like having all these different ways of introducing big changes and everybody having to kind of reinvent the mono repo and style of working and kind of coordinating all those big changes. I think that's really the where you have to base this decision on. I mean, I don't even really want to argue whether it's more beautiful or not. I mean, maybe, but if you think about the cost, even if you have a tool, something that is this sweeping, I think is only realistic to do in a closed environment.
So Andrew says two things. One is because it's hard, it's all the more reason to try to do it now, because there's going to be a big lag before 2.13. And the other one is about an automatic tool to rewrite things. I actually, if this were to get implemented and someone were to derive it, and to say there was a tool like Scala Style, which is relatively accepted and lots of people use, and there was an automatic refactoring of projects that would just automatically take your code and take it from the old syntax to the new one, and that code existed during the 2.13, right, where we have the bifurcated code examples, you could envision that this might not be quite as painful if we provide the tooling to do it. The problem is the amount of investment then is this high instead of this high to make it work, right? And this high is deceptively small. It's actually like this much to begin with, and then this much with the tooling. So if someone's willing to invest the time, sure, awesome. I think that's a good point. That would actually make it possible to do this. I could see that happening.
But the benefit for the time invested isn't really improving things that much for existing and new or beginning users.
Right. So there it comes down to the proposer. Do they have time to implement all this stuff and make it happen?
Well, I guess. I mean, who was the proposer? It was Martin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, we know that Martin's probably not going to go and implement this right now, but and of course not implement all kinds of tools and whatnot. So obviously that's not going to happen. But even if somebody would do this, so I think that an important part of this process is to kind of, as Adriaan said earlier, in some sense separate out the idea from the actual task of implementing it or doing it. I think right now we're deciding on the idea, and even if we wanted to go with it, even if we decided, like, okay, it's something we should go for, and we do all of this work and tooling and etc. I mean, what do we get for it, basically? Like, what's the benefit? And I'm not sure about that, really. I'm not sure it's really worth it.
Me neither, and actually that's not, I meant, yes, I would like to separate, the SIP's idea and the SIP's implementation, but there's another much bigger implementation effort, which is, dealing with the fallout of the SIP, and I think that should go into consideration of when you're judging the idea. Anyway, I'm also a little bit afraid that we're going to fall into the bike shedding syntax trap.
Yeah, so I'd like to move that basically we reject this with the caveat of what we just discussed. Like, theoretically, this could be really good. Targeted little improvements are more likely to make it through, but we just feel like it's a too much work for the gain right now. So we reject the SIP as is. Seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who is against?
Okay, so how about this? People in favor of rejecting it,
Yeah.
everybody say yes or raise your hand.
Hi. I mean, yes.
Okay, so the only one that's not in favor of rejecting it.
It's Andrew.
Wait, Andrew.
He raised his hand. Yeah.
Raise his hand? Okay. So everyone,
Thumbs up.
so unanimous reject.
So
Windows 10
everyone
doesn't
agrees.
have widescreen camera access, I think, or something.
Perfect. So this is rejected then.
There we go.
Before moving on to the next SIP, I'd like to point out that we as a committee don't have the ability to mark as dormant a SIP, right? So we can only mark as dormant a SIP if the author hasn't been working on that SIP in 2 iterations. So if we have scheduled an iteration an evaluation of the SIP and we haven't received any news, in that case we can mark it as dormant, and I will do that. But we as a committee don't have the ability to do it. What we can do instead is to postpone things. So in this case, if Seth would have agreed to postpone this under a concrete situation, under a concrete case, we could have done this, okay? But otherwise, it's not possible. So our only 3 options are accept, reject, or postpone. Okay?
What, you mean retroactively reject?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we move now to Eugene's SIP. I guess Eugene is going to present everything about it.
All right, that's going to be weird because this thing has been around for almost 5 years. So macros. I think. Right. I think it's no exaggeration to say that macros have become an integral part of Scala by now, and they enable a lot of practically useful use cases and are used all around the community. Though, in addition to being this really cool and ubiquitous tool, they have also earned the notoriety of being, arcane and brittle. What I mean concretely is that the most common criticism of macros is, I guess, their tool support. There are known problems with support for macros in IDEs, in particular, and that brings problems. Also, macros are based on Scala Reflect, which by now we understand that it's overcomplicated for its purpose. And well, of course, we're aware of these problems for quite a while, but while we were trying to fix them in an evolutionary way, by patching things here and there and fixing the compiler, well, hundreds of those bugs, we figured out that ultimately that's not going to cut it, and so the problem is at the very foundation, unfortunately. Well, that's bad news, of course, but the good news is that we also haven't been wasting time and have come up with a better proposal that takes the best parts of the current system, which have worked clearly pretty well, and earned macros their popularity, and well, we've developed them into Scala Meta and into the inline meta system that I presented at Scala Days, both in New York and in Berlin. I think that this direction of work, this way to introduce compiled and meta programming into Scala is the way to go. And therefore, what I propose that we do with the current SIP is, well, we tell it goodbye and we do something else, something better. And so, to provide some concrete ideas of what we're going to do next, I'll have to reveal that I've almost finished my dissertation by now, and well, a big chapter of it is dedicated to the new macro system. So once I'm done with it, within the couple of weeks, I plan to make the thing public, and well, that hopefully will be the beginning of the new SIP. So just to sum it up, macros are cool, and well, of course, as an author of the technology, I would say that, but I think we have a lot of practical evidence that speaks in favor of that. But we have gained a lot of feedback from their experimental evaluation, and now we need to close this experiment. It was a success, but we need to improve, and that's what we're going to do next.
Thanks, Eugene. So or anything to add, basically, from the committee? Eugene is basically proposing to reject this SIP, and we're going to vote on it. So I guess that.
Wait, so just as to summarize, okay, so clearly we reject this because Meta is the evolution of Scala macros, and therefore we should have a new SIP for Meta, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We reject it and say that there's something better coming. That as discussed, this isn't what we want.
Yeah,
and I think we all agree that macros are super useful, but as in their existing form, not really what we want long term.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so then everybody voting. I guess
People in favor?
raise your hand if you're voting for
Yeah.
also reject. So we all agree on rejecting, basically. I like. Okay, so everybody rejects. Fine.
Okay.
So this one's rejected.
Perfect.
Move on.
So one caveat on this though is that we need to be very careful with the communication around this, right? We don't want people to just read the headline and say, "Oh, macros are going away."
No.
As much as I have given tongue-in-cheek talks like that, let's be sure to not give anybody any,
Yeah.
It'll probably still happen anyway, so that's why I was thinking about suggesting we just use the same slip number for the new macro proposal. But no,
because I'm sure
I
that's
think
what people have been paying attention to.
Yeah, no, I think
Andrew is suggesting that we could we should postpone with the idea that the SIP would be, completely revised later.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
in this case, I think that Eugene is going to, revisit all the design, and the new SIP is going to differ a lot from the previous one. So I think that in this case, it would make more sense to reject it. And
I agree, actually.
So I think that the resolution is this, which also we didn't summarize and tack on to the last SIP. So Seth, as the reviewer of the SIP, then we would be expecting you to write this review. You can look back at the other SIPs to see how other people have responded, but basically it's up to you to do the set of communication correct in terms of like what the SIP committee has discussed. And sort of feedback to the author. Obviously, you're rejecting Martin's suggestion, which she wasn't going to implement anyway. So it's not, I think, not as big of a deal as for something that comes from somebody in the community, where you'll have to be very clear about what needs to be done next or the reasons why it's being rejected. And I think that in this case, since Eugene is the reviewer of this SIP, he can probably explain things the most clearly in the rejection. So I think that we can sort of rely on the reviewer, in this case Eugene, to do the right thing with the communication and make sure that it's clear that another SIP is forthcoming in the next few weeks.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
cool.
And also, I think I don't know whether it's in the current process, but it would be nice if we could leave a custom note why we rejected this, and also provide a link to the SIP, which is really.
We can just add this.
Yeah, we do it.
That's no big deal.
No worries.
Okay, so let's move on.
Okay, perfect. So we keep on with Eugene now, because Eugene is going to review SIP 27 trailing commas. They did some updates on the specification. We got news from Martin as well. He commented on the PR, so I would invite you to go to the PR and check it out. And then, I think that Eugene is going to provide all the details.
All right. So first of all, I would like to thank Dale for his great work and the reply on the discussion page on GitHub. It was very, very comprehensive. So Dale indeed went through the entire grammar of Scala, and then found places where trailing commas could be used. This is an amazing work, so thanks a lot. And now, just to provide a really quick summary for the text, essentially where we left this out on the previous meeting is that the idea sounds okay, and some people are interested in it, but there are some points that need to be cleared up. In particular, we found some corner cases. The case, I don't know where I should write. well, probably I'll just read the code. The case where you put something in parentheses and then add a trailing comma after that something. So it's unclear whether this should mean just an expression that's inside the parentheses or a tuple of one element. And why this was a point for concern is that in the future we envision special functionality for language-integrated HLIS, or something like that, for facilities for generic programming. And therefore, there are concerns that this kind of syntax, it may limit our design space for the future. And well, this is the kind of feedback that we provided to Dale last time. So to take a look at other use cases in the language, other grammar elements, and then see which problems can arise there. And indeed, Dale delivered, and in his message, he talks about 4 or 5 cases when when trailing commas may lead to ambiguities with respect to tuple 1. And so the question that we need to discuss today is what to do with these cases, and then how this syntax proceed. Since Heather and Jorge, they have been mentioning that Martin have provided some comment just recently.
Also, Paul provided a comment as well.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah,
Paul also
well.
contributed to the discussion. I would like to urge you guys to take a look at the webpage. So the last comment was left like 38 minutes ago.
Can you provide a link to where these comments are?
I'm going to quickly read Martin's comment, okay?
Thanks, Heather.
So here's a quick reaction. I think the proposal goes too far in that it allows trailing commas in lots of contexts in which, in my opinion, do not make sense. I propose we go slowly and only accept trailing commas for tuples right now, and we include tuple 1. Anything else might risk overshooting. The danger I see is that there is a good prospect that trailing commas will have a semantic meaning connected with H-lists. But if we go overboard now and accept them everywhere, we give up the opportunity to establish a nice correspondence between syntax and semantics. We can come back to the issue of generalizing trailing commas once H-lists are implemented, but H-lists should come first as they are truly the important part. That's Martin's response. Should I read Paul's question in response to that? Paul asks, what would be the point of trailing commas in tuples? Trailing commas are useful for reordering or removing elements. The tuples are fixed arity and heterogeneously typed. If there aren't going to be trailing commas for argument lists, you're better off doing nothing. So those are the 2 comments received kind of during the meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought the whole some crazy echo. To me, the whole point of this proposal was to get it for argument lists. And if we're not getting it for argument lists, why bother?
Sorry, guys, I muted you because I think it's their table microphone that was causing the feedback.
It's actually our latency got high enough that the noise canceling isn't working on their end anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yay.
But I muted them for a bit, so maybe we can have a quick side conversation.
Is it? I hope it's better now. I think I messed it up.
What I said clear?
Yeah. I couldn't hear it.
Oh, okay, I can quickly say again. I agree that the whole point of the proposal was to get this for argument lists. If we're not getting it for argument lists, there's no point.
I agree, yeah.
I agree.
My position, I just want to reiterate it, sorry. I think this is an IDE support thing. I think reordering elements in lists is something that IDEs can already do for you. I don't understand really the motivation. I mean, I understand the motivation, but I don't share it. I mean, I edit build SVT files as well regularly.
Yeah, it hurts little DSLs that you don't want to open an IDE for, that you're just going to VI or Emacs or whatever real quick. Or I guess Emacs is technically an IDE, but whatever. It doesn't count for me because I don't know how to use it.
I'm sure you could implement this at Emacs, right? Permute argument list.
Yeah. In any case, like the SVT build is an example there of where this pain actually shows up, probably most significantly. Dale, I know, happens to be an SVT contributor, so it kind of fits that he would be proposing this. That said, I'm actually more nervous about the notion of random commas turning things into H lists, but I reserve any judgment until I see an implementation of H lists. So.
All right, so it sounds like we're moving on. I mean, I think we have a couple people that have hard stops. So Maybe
Yeah.
we should order who's next by that.
Wait, so
So
is
I
it,
want to
on
say
this one,
first-
is it a postpone?
So I want to say
Well,
first
yeah, okay.
that Andrew has pinpointed as well the imports, that having trailing commas in imports is also important, and I think that he agrees with what Josh did, with what Josh said. Sorry. So I think that we should maybe vote on this because Josh has to go in around 10 minutes, and we have two steps more to discuss. So I think that people in favor of this SIP raise your hands.
Well,
Accepting this SIP as it is.
so okay, I think the question was, what do we do? Should we vote on it now, or should we postpone it because we have all of a sudden a bunch of questions?
I'm going to motion to postpone.
Okay,
Right.
but if we postpone it for another cycle, that means we have to be clear on what needs to be done. What needs to be
Right.
figured out. I mean, we can't just put this on hold forever. It's got to be.
What needs to be figured out is the conditions under which we could get this for argument lists, right?
Yeah.
So the conditions, I guess, should be figured out after HList support is integrated into Scala, I guess, and that's going to happen in 6 months or in 1 year. We don't know when.
Well,
exactly.
no, that's not the question. I guess it's. I thought it was just in general for argument lists, not necessarily for H lists.
So here's the thing. I want to vote for this, but the argument is like there's this future thing coming that's going to conflict with it. But not being able to see the future thing means I can't actually vote appropriately. So like if I had to vote now without being able to see the future thing, I would vote yes. Let's include this, because I can't assume that the future thing is coming.
I agree with your sentiment there.
Okay, yeah, me too. One thing that just occurred to me that may let us sidestep this is how often do people copy-paste code between real Scala code and SBT code? No offense, SBT. So maybe there could be a slight difference in the way we parse in SBT versus in general Scala.
That's physically possible for build SBT. You could do that, but I don't know if the SBT team would want to do that. They already have enough fun with the Scala parser. The other thing is the import syntax. I actually do run into the trailing comma issue on regular Scala code more often than I would expect. So,
Yeah. So to Andrew's point, when you comment out, the last dependency, now you have a trailing comma, but the IDE could be smart enough when you hit comment on a list that it actually removes, the comma. What I usually do is I uncomment the comma as well, like with a, just go like on the line before and, start uncommenting there. It's a little painful, but when you think about, the pain that is, and I understand that when you're in build file maintenance mode, you get annoyed at every little piece of friction that you get, but should we really, impose unknown friction on everyone else that is just, happy to get warnings when they got the list wrong? I don't know.
Here's
that's
a
why
question
I'm
for you.
conservative
Does it
about
provide any value not doing like is enforcing commas between everything in a list, is that actually providing value? And if so, where, right? Like what value does that provide over just letting people have trailing commas? Like if you invert that argument.
Yeah, I don't think I have a strong one. It's just that that's the way it is.
Right. So.
Yeah, it's of course the confusion as to is something else coming? Did someone walk up to your desk while you were about to to disambiguate this overload with another argument, or are you actually done?
Yeah. Well, so what I'm gonna say now is so Dale has identified like a few ambiguities in the syntax, right? That's actually would be my concern, is those ambiguities. If we had a proposal that had absolutely zero ambiguities, it'd be probably pretty easy to allow, right?
Okay.
But the problem is we do have ambiguity. So if we're going to pick a point of contention that's technical, that would be it, right? And that I think relates to the H list thing. So let's focus. If we're going to postpone, that would be the focus. Is can we either get rid of those ambiguities or somehow like allow the core of what you want without those ambiguities, and if not, maybe, but we need to think through the repercussions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Andrew points out that there's also an issue with error messages. Now we don't know whether we should give an error message about n or n plus 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was stumbling towards as well. So yeah, there's that.
So there is also the possibility to tell Dale just to change the scope of the SIP, and if he wants to do it, we can review again this SIP in the next iteration. If he agrees to make the changes.
If he agrees to make the changes.
But in that case, we would need to specify where we would, accept the training command.
Well, I mean, I don't think we need to, commit to accepting something like that way, right? We can just say this is where we think we need more work, and then we can talk about it again next time. I think we also need
to provide exact feedback.
Yeah, you've got to provide specifically what steps need to be taken, because otherwise this is kind of just blocking.
Yeah,
but that's kind of the point, right? Like, we don't know exactly what steps are necessary to make this acceptable. We're also exploring the design space, right? If we knew exactly what needed to be done, we would have already done it and gotten on with it, right?
So I think the concrete feedback could be, well, to answer a number of the questions that have been brought up, I see about 2 or 3.
So yeah, can we make a list of things we need? I think one is I'd like to see the list of ambiguities. I need to look through, but I would like to see a discussion of why that won't matter when it comes to implementing H-lists. The second thing is I kind of need to see the H-list proposal, like what we're even thinking to even understand that implication, because like as a committee can't evaluate at all.
Or at least the syntactic part of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and then the third thing would be, is there a trailing commas on imports, right? Is that something we could approve separately as a slip and just make that happen, and then evaluate the argument list problem as well, separately, right? Like, can we fragment it? Those would be the 3 things I'd say, right?
Okay. Eugene, do you have anything to add?
Well, I've documented everything. What can I say? Well, first of all, speaking of the list of the ambiguities, it's there. Probably needs to be specified explicitly in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 manner. But other than that, it's already there in the analysis that Dale has provided. I think, but speaking of salvage and parts of the SIP that are non-controversial, we can also refer to that comment. So some work can be done in that regard, and let's focus on that then.
All right. So then I think that so far that sounds like everybody is saying that we provide all of this feedback to Dale. Say that basically, as with all of these questions, we can't confidently accept or reject it right now. So it would be helpful if we could start to work through some of these questions together and maybe revisit it in the next iteration. Does that sound acceptable to everybody? So yeah, all right. I see all people saying yes. All right.
Perfect.
And so also another question I would like to add to the list.
So it gets another iteration, basically.
Yeah, it gets another iteration.
All right.
Speaking of another question, if we decide to add trailing commas to some select parts of the syntax, which do not cause problems with the H-list thing, is it worth it? Is it worth it to have 2 different ways of doing the same thing?
That's a good question to add to
That's
this.
true.
Yeah, I mean, let's not discuss it now because we really need to. We're going to run out of time.
Add it to the list. Yeah, so I think we are running out of time. So
Sorry to interrupt, guys.
3 minutes.
So we need to review now literal-based singleton types. Adriaan needs to provide feedback on that.
Okay.
So does Josh have one?
Feedback on
Yeah, I have to drop in 3 minutes. Now, one thing I'd like to propose is if we want to go through, we have 3 more SIPs to go through. I'd actually like to propose we have a second meeting to get through all of this.
No, we need only 2, and I think, yeah, we can maybe do it in another meeting.
I can do it in about 30 seconds.
All right, so maybe Adriaan go, and then we drop the other ones and push them back to the next meeting. Go ahead.
Okay.
All right. Well, I mean, I can be really brief. So, I mean, 2 years ago I championed this, and I'm still for it. It's great to see that the long legacy of George and mine and implementation is now finally being polished by Miles and get it to the finish line. Even though I'm reluctant to couple the implementation to the SIP, I think it's important to see those 2 things as separate. I have a couple of things that I'd like to raise for discussion probably next time. So one aspect of the SIP is a way to get take a step back maybe. Singleton types are basically a generalization to allow constants in paths. So when you used to write x.type or p.type in general, now you can write 42.type or some symbol.type or whatever. And so that type denotes the single value that is given by the literal, which is handy for a variety of purposes. So one thing that people want to do is now go back from the type to the value, and I propose we look into reusing type tags for that rather than inventing another mechanism that is currently in the implementation. So I guess basically all the feedback I have is going a little bit deeper in the feature interaction with other language features. So that includes type tags. That includes singleton bounds that are currently kind of under spec. It includes when we widen for infer types. Econ any, which isn't really necessary. We can also just keep doing equals when we're compiling type tests for singleton types. Quasi quotes is kind of it needs to be addressed, but it's not a big deal. It's just an implementation issue, I guess. And then there's kind of the hairy question of what x as instance of y.type really means. Logically speaking, if you do x as instance of 42.type, it means x equals 42 or x eq 42. If you implement that for all path types, the compiler doesn't even compile itself because we cast global to another global. And if you then check global equals the other global, you get a runtime class cast exception. So there's some discussion there because the spec says as instance of or is instance of is compiled in terms of pattern matching, but clearly that's not the case. So there are some things there that need to be cleaned up that I just want to touch on. I don't think we have time for a discussion. But overall, the implementation work is going in the right direction. I think the SIP the motivation is still valid. I would like to see the SIP document being split up in a higher level, the spec aspects of it and the motivation aspects that I really like that they're there. It's often the hardest part to really illustrate properly why you need this. But I would like all the implementation to be moved out of the SIP document and into a separate thing.
So I got to run, guys. I'm sorry, but I'll cast my vote before I leave, which is
I'm done.
Whatever Adriaan says the SIP needs, I believe is the correct thing to do. Therefore, if he says he wants to give feedback and postpone, I vote for that. If he thinks it's ready, I would agree. I'm a very big fan of the SIP.
Mm-hmm.
That I got to go. See ya.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
So now that he's gone, let me add some more stuff, since I already have his vote. No, I was done. So, I don't know what that means for the conclusion technically for the SIP. It's evolving, right? We should revisit the SIP text and update it with what we've learned from the implementation and talk about these interactions. So I don't know what the status for that is. Like, I don't want to accept the document as is because it's just not complete. And it even says so, at the header that it's just a work in progress.
Actually, who's the author of the SIP?
George is the original author.
Right,
I
so
was
basically it's one of
just the
these-
champion, and he did the original implementation. Then I rewrote it, and then Miles is now polishing it.
Okay. So then why don't we just do it this way? Why don't we ask for, so we ask for another iteration on this one, and basically we ask that, for example, the changes to the SIP that you've, like to the write-up that you've requested are made prior to voting on it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So Andrew makes a point that maybe there's something lesson to derive for the process. Should we have some kind of phase like conditionally accepted, like the dreaded conditional accept from academia?
Well, the thing is that
we don't have time to discuss this today, but let's put that on the agenda for next time.
So one thing I want to ask you, Adriaan, when you said about splitting up the SIP into the specification and then the implementation, you wanted the implementation to be aside. What do you really mean by that? So is there any actionable way to address your feedback?
So the SIP document refers to like test failures and stuff like that I don't think belong in a SIP document. You can have an appendix maybe, or you can have something else, but yeah, I think our process says, right, that we accept SIPs based on the idea, and then there can be an implementation. Yeah, anyway, okay, it's not a super important point.
Okay, so in this case, we propose you to summarize this feedback and put it in the pull request so that Miles or the other author can do something about it, and maybe depending on their answers, I will schedule an iteration for this SIP next.
Okay.
That's September.
Okay, so I propose that we wrap up this meeting by collecting discussion points for the next one. So I like Seth's idea about the new name for postponed. I don't have any other issues to propose, but maybe that's one way we can roughly stay within the time slot.
I agree with Seth and Adriaan about maybe because postponed, it does sound like we're punting it down the road, when really what we do mean is that we are asking for another iteration of work be done on it. So I think in progress is a good idea. So Seth, thanks for suggesting it. And
no, guys, but postpone doesn't really mean that we are going to review it. So there is a concrete status for a proposal to be in review, under review, okay? And this is going to be under review.
Okay.
When we postpone things is when we see that there is not going to be some progress in the close future, and then we postpone it so that when those circumstances are met, we open again the review process.
Okay, fine.
So,
but
sorry to interrupt. We're not going to solve this today. Let's put this on the agenda for next time. Let's do a roundup of everything else that we should discuss next time, and then I really think we should wrap up. Let's try to keep our meetings within the time slot so that we can actually realistically do these on a regular basis.
Okay. So in that case, I think that in the next meeting we're going to discuss SIP 20. Well, SIP. Hold on. I need to get notes. SIP 24, the repeating name parameters. That's going to be reviewed by Andrew, and then we're going to discuss as well SIP 27, training commas, and depending on Miles' feedback, we're going to discuss as well all the Singleton types. Right?
I hope you'll have stereo mics by then, and we'll make sure to schedule you first in the meeting.
Yeah. So anything that I may have forgot or something? Forgotten? No? So in this case, see you guys. Thank you for the meeting, and see you in September.
See you. Have a good evening, or a good morning, or and both, really.